days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback Podcast time. Welcome to the show. Today we're going to be talking about how many roster spots are available on the defensive side of the football. I think the 49ers have a lot of spots that are locked up. We're going to get into those. We're going to see how many roster spots are still available for these competitions that are going to be happening in training camp. And first, let's go back and let's look what the 49ers decided to do in 2021 with their roster breakdown. On defense, they kept 11 players on the defensive line. That was one of the most shocking things. It had been 10. Most teams keep 9 or 10 defensive linemen, but the 49ers went all in, keeping 11. And in fact, with Jordan Willis being on suspension, it was actually 12 guys that they had, amongst their roster. It's one of the most impressive things. And could the 49ers keep 12 this year? They could. It would mean they'd have to trim in other areas. Could they just trim one wide receiver spot, keep the offensive line at 8, and then keep 12 defensive linemen? They definitely could do that. I think they're going to keep 11, but we'll get into this a little bit. Now, with the linebacker spot, they kept 5. 5 very good linebackers last year. Cornerback 6. Safeties, they kept 4. So that is how the defense was built out. That's how they went ahead and handled it with those guys. That means 26 of the 53 rostered players were on the defensive side of the ball. So the 49ers had an emphasis on defense. Of course, we know they have an emphasis on defensive line, and they made sure that they had this team built accordingly. But now let's go through and let's figure out who are the locks to make the roster and how many spots are going to be available and up for grabs on defense. This is going to be a fun one. I'm really looking forward to getting into this. Now, if you don't agree with some of the players I have as locks, or you think other players should be locks, don't be afraid to go ahead and leave it in the comment section down below. Let me know what's going on with what you believe and how this team is going to be built. I'm going to go ahead and keep 26 defensive players too. I'm going to go through this breakdown and go through the locks and then go through how many players are available. So let's get into this. So defensive line locks. Nick Bosa, of course. Eric Armstead. Drake Jackson, the new rookie, the pick 61 in the second round, has to be on this team. Samson Ebukam, starting opposite of Nick Bosa. He's a lock to make this roster. I don't think there's too many people that question that. I'm sure there's going to be some, but he has to be. Javon Kinlaw, first-round pick a couple years ago. They're expecting huge production from him this year. I think it's a guarantee that Javon Kinlaw's on this roster. I think that's unanimous amongst everyone. If you don't think so, let me know. That would be interesting. And then I threw in Charles Omenihu. I think Charles Omenihu is a lock. The things that we've heard from Chris Kasarik about Omenihu, the way that D'Amico Ryans has talked about the fact he played inside and outside, means he could be one of those guys that's very versatile to this defense. The trade last year was huge by John Lynch at the trade deadline to get Charles Omenihu, and I believe he's a lock, which means you got 6 defensive line locks. It means there's a lot of position players that are still available to make this team at the defensive line position. Now, linebacker locks, of course, All-Pro Fred, Dre Greenlaw, Azeez Al-Shire, the 3 best linebackers together in the entire NFL. PFF actually agrees, which is surprising, but they are definitely that kind of group. And then I threw in a 4th lock in Oren Burks. This one could be questionable. A lot of people might not agree with that, but Brian Snyder wanting to go out and get a Burks for the special teams, the 49ers' emphasis during the offseason on special teams makes me believe with the money they gave to Burks and the way that they handled the offseason that Oren Burks is a lock. So I think there's 4 linebacker locks for the 49ers. At the cornerback position, I think it goes like this. Charvarius Ward, absolute lock. Their number 1 guy in the offseason. Their big signing. Emmanuel Mosley started last year, was cornerback 1 once Jason Verrett got hurt. I think he's an absolute lock. And Ambry Thomas, the 3rd-round pick last year, showed some promise last year at the end of the season when he was able to play. I think he's a guy that's an absolute lock to make this team. I don't see them moving on from him in year 2, even though there could be potential of 3 guys ahead of him when we open up on opening day. He might be the 4th guy on the depth chart on the outside. Still, I think he's a lock to make this football team. At safety, I got 3 locks. I got Jimmy Ward, Talanoa Hufanga, last year's 5th-round pick, 41% of the snaps as a player last year. That to me shows he's going to be an absolute lock to make this team. Will probably start next to Jimmy Ward. And then George Odom, for the same reasons I talked about Oren Burks. Brian Schneider wanted to get Odom. They gave Odom a lot of money. He's going to be on this roster. He's going to be one of the safeties. More than likely, he'll be 3 of 4. The question is, who's going to be the guys who make this roster, after that? So with that total numbers, there is 10 potential spots available for the 49ers on defensive side of the ball. There's 10 spots that could be open. We know that because we kept 6 defensive linemen, there are 5 defensive line spots that are up for grabs amongst a lot of players. And there's a lot of really good football players that are here. Now, I'm going to start with one of the most controversial players that's available, and that's Dee Ford. Right now, Dee Ford, everyone thought he's going to be released post-June 1. I was a part of that group. I really did. I thought the 49ers were ready to move on, save the money this year and next year, and go ahead and move on from Dee Ford. They've brought in a lot of edge rushers, but Dee Ford is still on this roster. So as long as he's on this roster, he's a part of this competition. So could he come out there and get one of these 5 defensive line spots? Maybe he could. Of course, you got Kemoko Turay, the guy that most people believe is going to be the edge speed guy to take over for Dee Ford in that specialized closer role. I think there could be some conversations about Omenihu. That's why Omenihu is a lock. I don't think Turay's a lock to make this team. I think he does have a good opportunity to do it. A guy with a lot of potential. So he's going to be competing for this job as well. Jordan Willis, started last year on the list for a suspension because of the performance-enhancing drugs, but he's a guy they brought back again, a guy they're high on since they traded with the Jets to get him. I think he's one of those guys that can sneak onto this roster as well. I think he's behind a Turay, but I definitely think the ability that he's shown makes him a legitimate contender to make this roster, especially with 11. If they keep 12, I think he might be a lock to make it. Then you've got Kerry Hyder, had the big 2020 season. We know anytime you get Hyder and Kasarik together, magic happens. They've brought in Kerry Hyder back. What his role is going to be interesting. Some are saying he's going to slide to the inside. Some are saying he's going to compete on the outside. Could he just do a hybrid type role? Could he be a part of the former Eric Armstead role that became the Arden Key role? It could be. Hyder, Charles Omenihu could definitely be in the mix for that type role. We know Chris Kasarik likes to employ it, and D'Amico Ryans is a huge fan of it. They're already doing it in minicamp, so that's something to watch. Then you've got more guys on the inside. Kevin Givens and Maurice Hurst, who, if you've been watching our training camp battle videos, that is going to be a battle. And it could be just a battle to get snaps, or it could be a battle to make this roster. And with only 5 spots up for grabs and all the good edge rushers that we've already talked about, it could be one of these guys is not on this roster. So these 2 guys are going to be battling for a roster spot, for playing time. It's going to be a good one. So those 2 guys are available as well. You got Hassan Ridgeway, the big offseason signing. He's probably flying under the radar for a lot of people, but he's going to be able to go in there and really solidify behind Javon Kinlaw. I can't put him as a lock because there's a lot of competition there. And when you have the amount of edge rushers we do that can play on the inside, I won't put anything past the 49ers as far as keeping those edge rushers over an interior guy if they believe they can play at a similar or equal level. So I think Ridgeway will make this team, but I'm not ready to put him as a lock yet. He's going to have to go out there and compete. And with the amount of competition that's along this defensive line, it's hard to say players are locks. It's ridiculous. Then you've got Kevin Adkins, the undrafted free agent from Fresno State. He's going to be coming in there to compete. I think he's more than likely going to end up being on the practice squad, but he's in the competition at least. And then you've got the 6th-round pick, Kalia Davis, pick 220. I think Kalia Davis is more than likely going to end up on the PUP list. He's not going to be playing. He got injured in the preparation for the draft, so I think they will try to redshirt him, but I put him on the list so everyone remembers him, and we can keep an eye on what the 49ers do. I think at some point during the year, if they're suffering from injuries, they could institute Kalia Davis back into the fold, but I do think they want him to get healthy. Now, at linebacker, because of our great linebacker core, the way it is, there's only going to be 1 roster spot available. And there's some competition there. I mean, it's probably more top heavy. Of course, you have Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, who is the most likely to get that spot. Couldn't put him as a lock. You've got to leave it open. The 49ers have made moves before. Jonas Griffith last year probably could have overtaken Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. They ended up trading him. They got some value there from the Denver Broncos. So Flanagan-Fowles, a huge special teams player. He's the most likely to get that spot, but you can't count out Curtis Robinson either, another guy they've brought in. He's been a part of this team for a little while now, and especially a part of the offseason. So he's going to come in there and compete. And then they have a bunch of guys that they've brought in along the way that are undrafted free agents, whether that's Jeremiah Gamel, Marcelino McCurry-Ball, Segun Owalbi. Well, I'm going to get his name wrong. But these guys are guys that are going to be able to compete, that are built on speed and athleticism. Gamel, not as much built on speed and athleticism, but has an understanding where he has to be. I think those three guys, likelihood of making this roster aren't good. I think it's a two-player race. Flanagan-Fowles, Curtis Robinson. I think Flanagan-Fowles, of course, because he's been a part of this team and developed there, has the uptick, the advantage, but we'll see how it plays out. And now one of the most interesting ones, of course, is cornerback, and there's 3 spots. Maybe you were surprised that I didn't give a lock to somebody else. You have 3 cornerback spots, and these are outside corners and nickel corners. And I think, first off, Jason Verrett can't be a lock, and even though I would love to make him a lock because of his potential, he just can't be because of the injury concerns. So he's not a lock to make this roster. We don't know what his health is going to be. If he gets out there in training camp and he plays to the levels that he was playing in 2020, early in training camp in the preseason in 2021, and even that Detroit game, then Jason Verrett will be a lock to make this team. Just not ready to say that now. There's just too many questions with the injuries. I think everyone can agree with that. You got De'Amar Lenore, the 5th-round pick last year out of Oregon. Question marks. Now, he came out, he flashed last year early. They put him into the games, when the regular season started, and he had his ups and downs. I think he's in an absolute dogfight to make this team, but he has potential to make it because he could play in the nickel, he could play on the outside, that versatility. Darqueze Dennard, they've brought back. Right now, it would look like he could be the number 1 guy at the nickel corner spot, but I'm not ready to make him a lock. He's a journeyman. He's been around the league for a while. There's still question marks about other veteran players, whether it's Jason Verrett or Emmanuel Mosley. If Verrett was to win on the outside, and Mosley could move into the nickel, which could make it so Dennard possibly doesn't make this team. Plus other players that they've brought in, including drafting in the 5th round this year, Samuel Womack. And Womack, I thought right away was a nickel corner, but then you hear Adam Peters, and this personnel department talking about the fact Womack could play nickel or on the outside. So more versatility coming from this cornerback room. So I'm not ready to go ahead and make any of those guys locks, and that's why. Now you've got Dante Johnson. Dante Johnson is a guy that has maybe the most versatility of any of these guys we've talked about. He could play in the nickel. He can play on the outside. The outside can be a question mark for him, but also play safety. So the 49ers wanted to play some games with keeping an extra cornerback and eliminating one of the safety positions, which we're going to talk about in a second. They could, knowing that Dante Johnson could fill that role and be able to bridge both areas. That could be a way for them to trim another roster spot, be able to keep another defensive lineman. You're looking for ways for them to be able to keep the most talent at certain positions, especially positions of strength that influence the whole defense. So watch Dante Johnson. Definitely not a lock to make this team. Seems like he's got a lock to be a part of this franchise at some way, shape, or form. So we'll see what happens with Dante Johnson. And then you've got Tariq Castro-Fields, a 6th-round pick 221. Interesting guy, a lot of upside. Think it's going to be very difficult to make this team. Now, if he does, that'll scream volumes about him, maybe the players in front of him, because this is a very, very tough room to make. And then you've got Quantrez Knight, undrafted from UCLA. One of my favorite players that's going to be on this team. I think he's just going to flash. He's going to make plays. Everyone's probably going to be excited about him during the preseason. I think he can overtake these other guys? I think it'd be really difficult. I really do. But I like him. So if you haven't had a chance to check out Quantrez Knight, check him out. He's a good football player. He's a tough, instinctual football player. His measurables are not off the chart in any category. But watching the film, he just jumps off as one of those guys that's going to go make things happen. So he's my undrafted free agent I want to keep an eye on. There's a couple of them that I really like on defense, and he's one of them. And then Kadar Holloman as well has a chance to make this team, a guy that's been around with Green Bay and all that. So I think this is one of those rooms. There's a lot of people available, a lot of players available for just 3 spots. Who's going to get those spots? It's going to be an absolute battle. And then at the safety position, we have one spot available, with me making George Odom a lock to go with Tauno Hufanga and Jimmy Ward. There's one spot available for 3 players. There's only one veteran player left on this roster at the safety position, and that is Tarvarius Moore. Tarvarius Moore is a guy that has starting ability in this league. He started football games for the 49ers. He was drafted by the 49ers. I think he has the most likelihood to make this team. I did not make him a lock because he's coming off an Achilles injury. I don't know where he's at with his recovery, but potentially he's going to be the 4th guy. And I think that would be a very solid 4 guys. Now, who's going to start is another question. Would it be Hufanga? Would it be Moore? Could it be Odom? I think that there's a lot of conversation that goes there, but those 4 guys I think would be the deepest of the group. Now you have Leon O'Neal from Texas A&M, an undrafted free agent who 49er fans are absolutely huge on. They really like him. They like his ability. They like his thump ability, the way he can go lay hits on people. And Leon O'Neal's fun. There's some questions about his fluidity in his hips, him being able to flip and run with wide receivers and tight ends that I question a little bit, but he's going to go out there and prove it. And I like his swag. He's getting out there and saying, hey, I'm going to do things. I'm going to make this team, and I'm going to make everyone eat, not drafting me. I like the mindset. We'll see how it translates onto the field. And then another one of the guys that I like, Taylor Hawkins out of San Diego State, not getting any love. No one's really talking about him, but he's a guy that I like. He's instinctual. I like the things that he did at San Diego State. I think he's got a lot of development. Maybe he's a practice squad guy, but I think he's going to go out there and open a few eyes. I think he'll at least give us some looks during the preseason and during training camp. So I'm really excited about this defense. So now that we've went through it, we know we had 8 offensive spots up for grabs, 10 defensive spots up for grabs, 18 positions or roster spots that are available in training camp that have to be figured out. I think this is one of the funnest things to do, is figure out who's going to make this roster. With 18 spots, there's still a lot to go on. There's still a lot of competition to be had. And we're going to see how it plays out. We're going to see how it all works out. Now, of course, with the specialists, we'll cover those real quick. We know Robbie Gould's making it, right? It's going to be Robbie Gould, Tabor Pepper, Mitch Wishnowsky. That's your kicker, your long snapper, and your punter. I think those are pretty solid, and those guys are going to be on this roster. And that equals 53. You got the 24 on offense, the 26 on defense, the 3 on special teams. We're able to work it in. We're able to keep 11 defensive linemen. So I think that this could be how they build the team again. Don't know if it's going to be these exact players. Let me know what you think about the locks. Let me know about what you think, who's going to earn these other spots. 18 spots up for grabs. Let me know who's going to win these defensive battles. I'm really interested to get into all of it. So this has been a fun one. I've really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to having more fun conversations as we get closer to training camp, more cool stuff. So if you appreciate what we do on this channel, give us a like, leave a comment, and go ahead and subscribe if you can. We're on a push for 3,000. Really fun. It's fun to talk about our team. It's fun to get into the ins and outs of the roster, get into the X's and O's. It's going to be a fun regular season. I'm looking forward to it. So I hope everyone enjoyed this episode of 49ers Cutback, and I'm looking forward to the next one.